We're going to talk about food prices. And we know they're high. We've been talking about that a lot, but actually they are outpacing inflation. So we got new inflation numbers earlier this week. And it's true that the overall number represented some good news. So inflation is pretty steady. When it comes to food, the situation remains pretty bad. So June marked the 17th consecutive month that grocery price inflation outpaced the all general inflation, basically the consumer price index. So overall inflation slowed to 2.8%, which I guess is good news. But for groceries, it was at 3.9%. So we're going to look at why that is happening. Mike von Massow is a food economist and professor at the University of Guelph, and he joins us on the line. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sue.
So, well, first of all, what do you make of this difference between the consumer price index, the inflation of 2.8, and groceries at 3.9?
Well, there's a couple of things. The first thing I would say is the annual number is the reality of how prices have changed in the last year. I think there's a bit of good news, if I'm going to look at glass half full, that food prices have actually gone down 2 out of the last 3 months. But the increases from the past year overwhelm those, so it's lower than it might have been, but we are seeing some at least trend in the right direction. Mm-hmm. The reason that food price inflation has been higher than other inflation is that food is more susceptible to things like climate change. And food is also very susceptible to some of these geopolitical issues like tariffs and wars than some other products. So we're seeing the reality of the food system being more susceptible to some of these shocks, and that's causing us higher levels of inflation.
And is this something that's unique to Canada, or is that sort of a phenomenon that we see around the world, for example, in the States?
Oh, we're seeing it around the world. Now, in the U.S., the food price inflation has been a little bit lower, and that's for a couple of reasons. When we're comparing inflation, we're not comparing the exact same price changes. So the food price inflation is based on sort of an amalgam or a basket of goods that represent sort of the average Canadian consumer.
Right.
And so the basket in the U.S. might be a little bit different. For example, we drink probably 50% more coffee than the Americans do, and coffee is a big thing that's gone up in the last year. So those sorts of things are part of it. Part of it is our Canadian dollar and our winter climate has made importing things more expensive because we truck it further. Gas prices have been more. But the general factors that have influenced sort of the foundation of food prices have been universal across the world, and some countries have had much higher rates of food price inflation than we have.
And does it seem to are there sort of policies that change how inflation affects food? I'm thinking of, the common agriculture policy in the EU, for example. Like, does that seem to mitigate the increase in inflation, or is it all the same?
No, it's pretty much universal. For example, we know beef prices have gone up, and the beef price increase is a result of a couple of drought years, so extreme weather in the early 2020s in Western Canada and the Western U.S. Farmers had less feed available, so they shrunk their herds, and cows are the factory of the beef industry, and so we have fewer calves and so less beef, and it just takes a while for the biology to catch up, right? A calf has to be kept. It has to grow, then it has to be bred, then it gestates for, 10 months or 11 months, then it has a calf, and then that calf has to grow. So there's just this lag in the process. So really, the big factors have been wars, which affect, the war in Ukraine has affected the availability of wheat, some fertilizers, some vegetable oils. The Trump tariffs have also played in both directly and indirectly into our food prices. As an example, tomatoes got very expensive over the last year, partly because Mexico, who supplies, I think, 60% of our imports of tomatoes in the winter, planted fewer because they were subject to tariffs by the U.S. Then they had a bad year, so you had a lower potential, and then a bad year, so supply went down. So there are some policies, but most of this is sort of climate related and geopolitical related that is beyond the control of most governments.
Of course, yesterday we found out that President Trump wants to put tariffs on the dairy industry and the milk industry. Are we likely to see, is that likely to affect us here, or is that more about the American consumer?
That's more about the American consumer. And really, the American consumer might feel it if they have a favorite Canadian product, but we are a fairly small portion of the entire U.S. dairy market. So this will hurt Canadian producers, although we don't export a whole bunch there. It will hurt us in Canada more than it hurts, because demand will go down more than it hurts the U.S. Honey producers in Canada will feel it, because that's one of the only food products that is, dairy, honey, and cut flowers are really the only agricultural products that I saw on the list with a quick glance. So that's not going to affect us as consumers in Canada.
But I would like to ask you about producers and how this sort of consistency of food inflation going up is affecting farmers, for example. I mean, people farming bulbs in PEI also, as well as beef farmers. Like, is that affecting their overall bottom line?
Well, beef prices are really good. Means beef farmers are making good money because there's less supply. It's right. Economics 101. There are fewer calves. They're making more money for those calves. There are fewer cattle, so they're making more money for that beef. So right now, for beef farmers, things are pretty good. It's not always as directly related to what we're seeing in the store. If, for example, tomato prices have gone up, but when Canadian field tomato production comes in, prices will come down because we're not trucking it as far. Supply will be good. Knock on wood that we don't have some sort of weather event that affects them here in southwestern Ontario. So in some cases it's beneficial for farmers. In some cases it's completely independent of farmers, and it depends on what the factor is that is affecting the retail price of that product.
Well, listen, it's really interesting to talk to you, and it always amazes me how there's so many factors that go into, the things that we end up buying and putting in that grocery cart. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. That's Mike van Massow. He's a food economist and professor at the University of Guelph. That's why he's talking about tomatoes in southern Ontario. Of course, we're lucky here with our Savoura, those big greenhouses that are up on the way to the Laurentians. There's a really cool little tool. I'm trying to find it. Average retail food prices data visualization tool that the government of Canada, if you like that kind of thing, that the government of Canada puts out. And it's got every grocery that you can imagine, from olive oil to chicken thighs to ketchup. And it tells you what the monthly average retail price is month by month, and also year by year, and little arrows whether it's gone up and down. So if you really want to look at that, the government of Canada puts that out.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.